In the next 2 minutes, you'll see a series of mixed-up scenes. Because we can't show you what really happened, we'll have to tell you. We're getting now to the heart of this matter, the police hosing, which the committee calls the, quote, communist-led riots. First, you must know that there were 2 police authorities in operation at City Hall on this particular Black Friday. There was no apparent liaison between them. On one side was Sheriff Carberry. On the other, Inspector McGuire of the city police. The sheriff seemed to be working in one direction, the inspector in another. Naturally, there was confusion. Friday morning, the sheriff approached the students saying, in effect, "Wait in the rotunda, and I'll try to arrange for you to be admitted to the hearing room." Through no fault of his, Sheriff Carberry could not make the necessary arrangements in time for the afternoon session. In the meantime, the responsible student leadership made several attempts to cooperate with the police. They were rebuffed. They sensed the danger in the situation and made frantic efforts to contact the mayor or some other responsible city official. No one was available. At noon on Friday, the students thought their efforts were to be successful, that at last they were to be let in on a first-come, first-served basis. And again they were treated to the spectacle of the pass holders being admitted ahead of them. They felt cheated. They felt they'd been betrayed. Sheriff Carberry had led them to expect the afternoon sessions would see admissions on a more equitable basis. Ironically enough, the sheriff had done as he promised. He'd gotten the permission he was after, and he was on his way back to City Hall with that information when the hosing began. Under Inspector McGuire's direction, a squad of policemen moved up the City Hall stairs. The students quieted down. They expected the police to make some statement, some request for them to leave the building, but nothing was said. The committee's version keeps emphasizing that the students were warned. It's true the police asked a few individual students to leave, but there was never a general warning to the students. No hint was given of what was to come. Out of the sight of the students, the police began uncoiling the fire hoses. The students tried to demonstrate their nonviolent intentions by sitting down. Some witnesses heard a policeman shout something to this effect: "So you want some of this, do you? Well, you're going to get it." And then the water was turned on. That's what really happened. But here's the committee's version of what happened.
When one officer warns that fire hoses will have to be used if the crowd does not disperse, the demonstrators become more and more unruly. One student provides the spark that touches off the violence when he leaps over a barricade, grabs a police officer's nightstick, and begins beating the officer over the head. As the mob surges forward to storm the doors, a police inspector orders that the fire hoses be turned on.
Well, you surely know that Robert Meisenbach was acquitted in his San Francisco trial. If you saw Life magazine of May 23, 1960, you saw a photograph of Meisenbach standing perfectly dry over against a wall of the rotunda, looking on while the students were being hosed. Not even the committee will suggest a communist trick so adroit that a man can touch off a riot, beat a police officer, be drenched with fire hoses, and get away, all dried off within a matter of seconds. It can't be done and wasn't done. Even the officer who supposedly was assaulted admitted at the trial there was no barricade jumping by Meisenbach. And another curious fact: despite all the experienced press and television cameramen on the spot, all the footage that was taken, no one has come forward with a single frame showing anyone jumping any barricade, nor, as the committee would have it, quote, any mob surging forward to storm the doors, end quote. Do you see anything of that kind here? You can bet that if it had occurred, someone would have pictures of it. And you can bet at even longer odds that if such pictures existed, the committee would have publicized them far and wide. Look at these scenes of police rousting students from City Hall. Which group is using all-out violence? The students or the police? And just suppose, for the sake of argument, that a student had leaped a barricade and assaulted an officer. That would certainly be grounds for his arrest. But would that, if it occurred, have justified the police in handling all the students in this way? The fact is, no one leaped a barricade. No one assaulted an officer. Then why did the police use the hoses? Only the police know that, and they aren't saying. There has been a widespread awareness, not only in San Francisco, but nationally, that the evidence points to brutality and violence on the part of the police, rather than on the part of the students. We ask you to draw your own conclusions. Remember that most of the scenes you saw just prior to the hosing were actually taken the day before, on Thursday. But the makers of Operation Abolition weren't satisfied with the truth. It wasn't dramatic enough. It didn't prove their point about a communist-led riot. So by combining the two demonstrations, the film editors were able to create a distorted, untrue but persuasive effect. As we said before, Representative Walter has tried to defend himself by saying the errors in the film are purely accidental. You know now they were not accidental. When the committee subpoenaed the film from the photographers, all sequences were properly dated and labeled. There was no excuse for error, no excuse for mixing up the true sequence of events. It's a matter of record that at least 7 students were injured. What Operation Abolition didn't include was the original newsreel film showing injured students lying prostrate and apparently unconscious on the floor of City Hall or outside on the ground. Such scenes were carefully deleted by the committee's producers. In contrast, see now what tender concern they have for the police. In the words of the original narrator,
and none injured. 4 students suffer minor injuries. 8 policemen are injured to the point where they require hospitalization. 5 officers were seriously hurt, 2 suffering heart attacks, and 3 are treated for deep cuts. Here you see Patrolman Frank Dunphy, aged 61, who suffered a stroke when he was knocked down by student agitators.
This makes a good story from the committee's point of view, but the truth, as shown by the official police report, is that Officer Dunphy merely collapsed from exhaustion, and other police injuries were minor. Why shouldn't they be minor? No one was turning hoses on the police or dragging them downstairs. And all 8 policemen were back at full-time duty within 3 days. The committee also falsely tied in the students with communism by declaring that just before the hosing, quote, students enthusiastically join in on the refrains to the song, "Abolish the Committee, We Shall Not Be Moved," lyrics to which are lifted from the old Communist People's Songbook, end quote. Actually, "We Shall Not Be Moved" is an old religious spiritual, well known to people acquainted with folk music, which appears in hymnals and is presently the theme of sit-in demonstrators in the South. These are the arrested students being booked. Later, charges against all but one, Robert Meisenbach, were dismissed, and Meisenbach was acquitted by a jury after less than 3 hours of deliberation. Now, with all the talk in the committee's film about communist leaders and communist dupes, only 2 of those arrested are even alleged to be communists. And these 2 joined the group only after the hoses were turned on. So even this flimsy pretext by the committee of communist provocation of police falls flat. Now the film shows you some more so-called evidence of communists agitating California students into opposing the House Committee on Un-American Activities. This includes clippings from the Daily Californian and the San Francisco Chronicle. The implication is that these news stories on events surrounding the hearings are a result of communist inspiration. Showing a page from a newspaper obviously doesn't prove this claim, nor do continuing scenes of pickets and crowds taken at various times during the hearings. Again, you will see actions of some of the witnesses under subpoena in the hearing room. You're informed in Operation Abolition that in some way these witnesses were directly responsible for the demonstrations a mile away at Union Square. Also the demonstrators outside City Hall, and also those trying to get into the hearing. The committee narrator tells you it's a communist tactic for witnesses to defy it. If so, why does the committee subpoena the same witnesses again and again? Is it because they really think the witnesses will suddenly break down and make some dramatic disclosure? Or is it because they can count on a stubborn, defiant witness making a good newspaper story? The committee doesn't like statements from unfriendly witnesses. Its rules say that any statement can be rejected as an attack on the committee. So any witness who dares disagree has no way of being heard, either verbally or in writing, without the committee's indulgence. Here we see Archie Brown attempting to read just such a statement.
I live at 1027 Brussels Street, San Francisco. I am a longshoreman. I want to state, Mr. Chairman, that, you still on question. I have something to tell the committee. I want to tell the committee.
In response to a subpoena which is served upon you by this committee.
My family is being threatened.
Today in response to a subpoena which is served upon you by this committee. Mr. Chairman, I respect to suggest the witness now be ordered and directed to answer the question.
I direct you to answer that question.
Are you referring today in response to a subpoena served upon you by this committee?
Yes, it was served on me by this committee.
And are you represented by counsel?
That I am.
Counsel, will you kindly identify yourself?
George Anderson.
Mr. Brown, where and when were you born?
Mr. Chairman, I want to state that
I direct you to answer the question. That's the only way we can proceed orderly.
Well, I was subpoenaed here.
You're under direction.
When were you born, sir?
I was subpoenaed here, and my family.
With the next question.
My family.
If you please, sir.
With the next question.
I was born in Sioux City, Iowa.
Mr. Chairman, I respectfully suggest the witness now be ordered and directed to answer the outstanding principal question.
What is the outstanding principal question?
The outstanding principal question is where and when were you born?
I already said it.
Give us then, please, a word about your education.
As Archie Brown doggedly continues his efforts to read a statement, Chairman Willis threatens him with expulsion from the hearing room.
Under the rule of the committee, you may file that paper with our director at this time, if you wish to.
I wish to read this statement. I want to read this statement, Mr. Chairman. How come that you're bridling me? I want to explain my position. All right, I want to.
You may file the statement, you may not read it.
I'm going to read my statement and want to make a motion.
I direct you, sir, to escort the witness outside the courtroom.
Amendment 14 of the Constitution.
And Archie Brown is forcibly removed for the third time. The committee needn't have been surprised that this next witness, William Mandel, turned out to be hostile. Their narrator described him as, quote, an identified agent of the Communist Party, end quote. What did they expect? Well, they expected an outburst, because this is great publicity. In fairness to Mr. Mandel, it should be said that the testimony you hear was presented out of context.
If you think that I am going to cooperate with this collection of Judases, of men who sit there in violation of the United States Constitution, if you think I will cooperate with you in any way, you are insane.
Now, sir, we elect here.
Mandel's answer that he was a lecturer was left out. And now we hear only part of his answer to the next question, whether he was a party member and lectured as such.
This question has no purpose other than to harass me. When I was asked this question last in 1943 by the late Joe McCarthy, and let me say that I am honored when people come up to me on the street, perhaps they don't deserve this honor, and say, "You're the man who killed Joe McCarthy." Because I happened to appear on the first day of the book-burning hearing, and I did my best to conduct myself in the manner which I'm conducting myself today. If there were any such evidence against me under any law, the proper authorities could move against me. This body is improperly constituted. It is a kangaroo court. It does not have my respect. It has my utmost contempt. And I am not going to answer that question, sir.
Next, you will see Frank Wilkinson being interviewed by a newsman. He is described by Congressman Gordon H. Shearer as a top communist agent and accused of agitating among the student demonstrators. Of course, this accusation is totally unsupported and just as phony as the crowd noises that were dubbed into the film.
Front of the City Hall today.
No, I've just been an observer of those.
I understood you had said you were organizing protests against the committee.
Yes, one of the things that our committee does and that I do for our committee is to come to each community when the committee issues its subpoena to assist the subpoenaed persons and others in the community who are not familiar with the kind of unconstitutional behavior that this committee carries on, to assist that community and to assist those subpoenees in their own self-defense.
In the committee hearings today, you were called an international communist agent. Are you a communist?
That's a very flattering remark. I've been frequently called a hardcore communist, a local communist by Mr. Ahrens, but never an international communist. As far as the basic question is concerned, until the Supreme Court has answered the fundamental constitutional question, which is now pending in my case, which is one of the 36 First Amendment test cases of this committee, until they have resolved this matter and declared these kind of questions under compulsion to be illegal and unconstitutional, I refuse to answer the questions away from the committee, just as I refuse to answer them directly to the committee when I've been called.
Now you've seen the film known as Operation Abolition, but accompanied by a narration of facts rather than unfounded statements and deliberate distortions. I'm sure you now see that what happened in San Francisco was not a communist-led riot, nor even a group of young Americans being duped by communists. Once you recognize this truth, two questions then arise. Why were the students there? And why did the House Committee on Un-American Activities make this film? First, the student demonstrations. Increasingly, students have become passionately involved in civil liberties issues. These are good, forthright American issues, going back a long way to the Declaration of Independence, to the Bill of Rights, and coming right up to today with our serious national concern for the civil rights of all Americans. There's a difference between communist dupes and high-minded young men and women proud of their country's traditions of freedoms, so openly proud of that tradition that they had the courage and conviction to protest the violations of those freedoms by the Walter Committee. The students protested by peaceful picketing. They sought admission to what had been announced as a public hearing and were denied on flimsy, frustrating, and conflicting grounds. Yes, their reaction to this denial, singing and chanting inside a public building, may rightfully be criticized. But as the record shows, They maintained their self-imposed passive resistance and acted on the whole with a restraint and courage not always matched by their elders. Now the second question. Why did the House Committee on Un-American Activities twist and distort this whole episode? Why did they place scenes out of sequence? Why did they leave out certain scenes? Why did they make narration statements that were totally unsupported either by the pictures or the facts? Why did they give special prominence to the misbehavior inside the hearing room of a few communists and alleged communists who had been subpoenaed? We believe that the original film and narration were carefully and deliberately designed to create the impression that all who oppose the committee are either communists or communist dupes. In this manner, the committee seeks to discourage further protests against it, particularly among students, and to inhibit freedom of speech and assembly. Yes, some Americans have been duped, but in this case, the duping has been done by the House Committee on Un-American Activities. Mark well that the Walter Committee did all this by indulging in a highly dubious bit of business, using its subpoena power to seize private property belonging to television stations and turning it over to a commercial film producer who made the distribution and took the profits. Our disclosure of the distortion of this incident and the untruthfulness of Operation Abolition gives the American people a concrete example of the irresponsible manner in which the House Un-American Activities Committee operates. The ACLU supports the statement of the New York Times when it says, "This whole un-American operation by the Un-American Activities Committee is evidence not of the need for its continuance, but need of its abolition, a course we have urged before." And that's why we have just shown you Operation Correction.